Okay, good evening everybody. Hi, my name's Margie and I'm going to do the July teachings for the Monday nights, so that's the next 5 Monday nights. I've got the short straw. No. So tonight, and I think for the next 5 nights, we'll see how we go, I thought tonight I'd do very much an introductory into Buddhism, and I know people come on the Monday nights for all sorts of reasons, lots of reasons, maybe not necessarily a Buddhist or even interested in Buddhism. But tonight I thought I'd do a little bit about Buddhism, more specific, and so I thought I'd start off with actually the Buddha himself. So the Buddhas, they're always in a Buddhist gompa or temple. He's always sitting there in the middle. And the Buddha was an actual person, and he lived in India between 2.5 and I've even heard 3,000 years ago. So it's actually what's Nepal now, but at the time they were kingdoms, and he was a prince born into a very princely family, and so his father was the king of the kingdom, and he was an only child and dearly loved child. So he grew up really in a gilded cage because his parents were afraid that he'd run off and be an ascetic, a spiritual seeker, because it was predicted by a sage that would happen. So they didn't want him, they wanted him to be a great warrior king, and so they kept him enclosed in this wonderful palace, pleasure palace, that was in their kingdom. And he had everything he could ever desire. He had a wife and a son, but he had concubines and lots of gems and riches and music, dance, everything. He had the life. But Buddha, or Gautama was his name, Prince Gautama, at the time, he wasn't happy with all of this. There was something upsetting in his mind. He was curious, he was concerned. He just thought, this can't be it. And he was curious about all of the pleasures, and he had a bit of dissatisfaction in his mind. So whatever chance he got, he would try and steal himself out into the village and see what the real life was about. And a couple of times he got out in the fortress. He was really in a gilded cage. His parents made sure he couldn't get out, but a couple of times he snuck out, and he saw an old man who was hunched over and really sick and old. And he had a shock. He was never allowed to see anybody old. And he saw people who looked like they were hungry and sick. And he got really shocked. He'd never seen anybody sick in his life before. And another time he snuck out, he saw them carrying a body. And he'd never seen a dead body before. And he was a young man in his 20s. And he really hadn't been told about death. And so this really shocked him. And he was really concerned and shocked. And then he couldn't settle into his luxurious life anymore. Even though he had all the riches and pleasures, all the sense pleasures, he was beautiful, everybody loved him. Perfect. But he was just not happy. He just knew there was something was up. So one night he snuck out and he snuck away. And in India, as there is still now, and then at the time, there were a lot of spiritual seekers and a lot of meditators, a lot of sadhus. So he joined, and that was kind of normal at those times. He joined a group of spiritual seekers. There were five of them, and he joined them. There were 6, and they went and they lived in the forest. And he, completely copped out, and he lived in the forest, and they were almost naked. And they were into ascetic practices, very severe type meditational practices, because their belief was by doing very austere, very strong ascetic practices, then you would achieve, the level of enlightenment. So he did that for 5 years, and after 5 years, nearly starving, he thought, this isn't working either. I've had privilege and luxury, and now I've had the opposite, trying to find, and he sort of became a bit despondent. So he left his friends in the forest, and he went walking, and he saw a young girl, and she had some rice pudding, and she gave it to him. He had his first proper meal in a long time. And then he found some nice grass and he cut it, and he walked up over a beautiful river, and he saw a beautiful Bodhi tree, they're big rainforest trees. And he put some cushion down, and he sat down after he'd eaten, relaxed a bit. And then he went into meditation, and all night he stayed in meditation. And by the time he woke up in the morning, he was enlightened. And so when he became enlightened, he woke up in the morning and he thought, I've found the path. And then he thought, it's very strange. It's a very hard thing to explain. He said, I don't think I can explain it to anybody. So he went wandering around India, in that part of the world. For 6 weeks, he was just wandering around, happy, just blissing out, I guess. And then he came across, in now modern day Varanasi, just outside the city, to this place called Sarnath. And he found his 5 friends found him. They'd still been in the forest and wandering around, and they went, "Oh, Gautama, where have you been? What's up?" So it was about 6 weeks later. And he said, "Well, you know, I ate some food, I meditated, and wow." And they said, "You look amazing, tell us. So because they'd asked him and because they'd had such a close connection, he sat down with them and he gave them a teaching. And the first teaching he ever gave them was the teaching on the 4 Noble Truths. So that was the first teaching the Buddha ever gave, and that was in Sarnath, and that was to his 5, who became then his disciples. So the teaching he gave on the 4 Noble Truths, which we'll talk a little bit about now, was the 4 truths are the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering can end, and the truth of the path, which became the Buddhist path, the way to happiness or enlightenment. So, and that was the first teaching that the Buddha ever sat down and taught. And from all of his teachings, and he gave many, many teachings over 40 years, all can sort of come down to these four truths, I guess. They all fit into that. So, as the Buddha had discovered when he did escape his gilded palace, the truth of suffering. And for him, that truth really came home to, no matter who you are or what you are, sickness, aging and death are aspects that we all suffer. There is no escape from sickness, aging and death. And also as humans, in that sense as well, there's no escape from being, having to give up what we love most at some point, and having to experience things we don't want to experience. So that is really the understanding of the truth of suffering, is that they are inescapable. It's an inescapable truth. So from that premise and from that basis, he taught what was the cause, how do you stop that, and then what is the way, the path through. And you know, and that can go from a very profound point of a path, the path to enlightenment, and it also works on our very mundane level. Because it's a truth that we all experience, whether you agree with Buddhism or not, or whether you are a great meditator, or whether you're just an ordinary person. That fundamental idea or truth is, we all, at some level, we all experience that. So, and sometimes, often that's what brings people to a place like Tara Institute, is that, a bit like the Buddha in his gilded cage, we have a notion or we have a feeling that, you know, we're a bit dissatisfied or confused, or something's happened in our life that we're dealing with grief, or we're unhappy in some ways. And so that's often a very normal pathway to a spiritual path, or just to asking yourself or finding out more about, more than what may be a material world. So the Buddha lived in, I guess, the top of a material world sense. I mean, he lived in that worldly sense at that point. So, and then what he taught from that, the cause of suffering, which is the second noble truth, is that from a mental point of view, our suffering arises in our minds. We are the authors of our own experience, really. So it's within our mind, it's within our own capacity that suffering and the cause of suffering arise. So these two things are interrelated. It's because of a causality. We suffer because we create the causes, and the causes we create more suffering. And so from his point of view, he taught about wrong views. And then from a point of a wrong view, delusions will arise, and from delusions we create negative karma, and negative karma then creates the suffering, and then we just sort of get in this sort of cyclic existence is what he called it. We kind of get caught up in this round of wrong view, and we can't see it. We can't sort of step back and see how we're kind of creating a lot of the drama and a lot of the pain and suffering within our own mind. Our tendency is to externalise and to blame and to look at it as totally, it's nothing to do with me, it's happening to me. And really what the Buddha taught was, it's really up to you, it's your mind, and you've got power and control over your mind. And that often it doesn't seem like we do, but basically that again is the fundamental cause of suffering is our mind, and the fundamental pathway out of suffering is our mind. Which leads us to the third noble truth, which was the cessation of suffering. So the first two deal with suffering and the cause, and the second two, the third and the fourth, are the cessation and the path. How do you stop it, and what is that pathway out? And so his pathway out was to then hold correct view, right view, and follow right actions. So because karma, you can create the causes that will create happiness within your mind. And so wrong view and right view are really to do with how we understand the world and how our mind operates. And next week I'll go a bit more into that. But fundamentally that kind of means that all things are conditioned on cause and effect. So all things have this cause and effect relationship, and all things are dependent on each other. And that's basic. Karma is this idea of cause and effect, causality. And that's why, and dependent arising is this idea that nothing exists just as an externalized thing, something external existing from completely out there, unchanging or permanent. So all of the things, to have a right view is this idea of understanding impermanence and interdependent relationships and karma, cause and effect. And those understanding life from that point of view, and that your mind is subject to these things as well, gives you a much better kind of, much more real, you're much more in touch with reality, so you're able to then work more with the reality that you're living. Rather than blaming and externalising everything, you're able to understand things much more from your point of view of being the cause, but also being the agent to change. And so part of that change, so right view, understanding how reality is, or understanding the mind and your relationship with mind, but also understanding your your thoughts, having right action, right view, which is when we come to the idea of an ethical behaviour. And all religions are based on ethics, and Buddhism, for that reason too, has this idea of ethical behaviour. So the main teaching the Buddha taught as well was non-harming. So again, how we act because of karma will have a result. So being ethical, not killing, stealing, harming others, then that creates the positive mental states, the positive, which are more concordant with reality because of the way things exist. Anyway, we'll go deeper into this, but this is sort of the big picture, I guess. And the other part of conduct is developing the minds of love and compassion. And again, because the minds of love and compassion are much more concordant with reality. They're much more concordant with how our natural state of mind is. And we'll go into that. But that's kind of a very, quick and very big picture, but also very simplistically, in a way, what the Buddha taught and the path. So I think in a way that's different maybe from other religions, is this idea that suffering is the basis of our existence to some level, but at the same time it's also rooted in our own minds. And it's there. So all of our suffering comes from our own mind, and even our physical, when we suffer physically, it first has its origin mentally. And also, I think that's when you think of any action that you've ever done or anything you've ever said, it always has had its genesis in your mind. It has to have come from a thought. And so in a way that kind of relates to that idea that everything is from mind, everything is projected and comes from mind. So in that way, Buddhism gives you that, it sort of empowers you to work with your mind, which is the path, really. It's a mental path. So when in Buddhism you say the path, it's about those mental mind states. And I think, when you think about neuroscience these days, they're always talking about the pathways in the mind. It's that idea of setting down different thinking or different patterns, and again, positive, building an idea of love and compassion, and building on that to create this love and compassion in your mind. And so lessening those negative mental states and building positive mental states. And so that's why the idea of this ethical basis, this right conduct, is part of that Buddhist path. So I'll just go back to the view and talk a bit about karma in a bit more detail now. So when we talk about karma, when the Buddha taught truth of suffering and the cause of suffering, he presented this with this idea from the 12 links, which is these 12 interdependent links of karma. So karma is this idea, it starts off, as I said, mental intention. So we have this intent within our mind, and then that intent becomes an action, and then the action itself has an effect. So the intent can be positive, or it can be negative, or it can be neutral, and they're the three options. So a negative intent can only lead to a negative action, will lead to a negative result. And a positive intent will lead to a positive action, which will lead to a positive result. So it's very simply, that's the basis of karma. So it starts mentally, and it's pre-thought, and that's why this idea of habituating one's mind to it. So, and that's why the practice of love and compassion lends itself naturally to positive intent, positive thought, positive action, where a delusion like hatred or anger will lend itself powerfully. You won't even have a thought, you'll just be angry, which will lend to angry speech, which will lead to hurting somebody, which will lead a negative result because you've harmed somebody. So this is this idea that our minds become very powerful and they can overtake us in that way, so we can feel we don't have a lot of control of our minds. Because if our delusions are very strong, we're already screaming at somebody and upsetting them before we've even had much time to think about what we're doing. And so that's this idea of training the mind. And so very simply, because when a delusion, or when things ripen within our mind, when a karma ripens, it will either be we have a like or a dislike. And with the like, we will be attracted to something, and dislike will be we want an aversion to something. And that's where the either desire, attachment, or the anger and hatred comes. So, and karma is complex and subtle. So the thing with karma, and this is where, I guess from a Buddhist point of view, very much it's an idea of reincarnation. So karma does come from causality is always definite. Like I said, if it's a positive intention and positive action, positive result. But karma itself, as it ripens, it's not linear. We always think of things in a linear sense. Our worldview is very linear, and karma itself isn't linear in that sense, and that's why it's a subtle and hard to understand concept, because we think bad things happen to good people, and so we tend to externalise that bad thing, and that person couldn't be the cause of that thing, and that's when that might be a past life, and this is so karma itself is difficult to understand. But the idea, it's explained often, this idea of a seed and a sprout. In that if you have a seed, and I left the seed there, even though that seed might have the potential to be an oak tree, if I left the seed sitting there, it can't ripen. It can't be an oak tree, it's just a seed. But if I took that seed and put it in soil, and I gave it good soil, and I gave it water, and I had sun, then the potentials of that seed would ripen. And that seed would ripen into, depending on its position, depending on the love or the soil or the water or whatever, the conditions, the oak tree would definitely come, and then it'd be a healthy tree, non-healthy tree, whatever, depending on the conditions. So the cause and effect. So there's many causes and many effects within that seed. Many conditions have to come together. So karma is very much like that. It has to be lots of causes and conditions that come together, and they not in a linear fashion. But also the thing with the way to understand karma is, if that seed was an oak tree, you wouldn't expect a rose bush. It's always related. So again, like I said, if it was a negative karma and had an impact, a particular impact like killing, then cutting one's life, having one's life cut short at some point would be the result, because they are related. So that is the way karma does work, in that way. But one thing we do, but we do have, so that's why I guess from a Buddhist point of view, from this point of view, is that we want to create positive karma, and that's now something that you hear everywhere. Everybody says good karma, positive karma. That seems to be in the normal. We're all saying it, and that's why this idea of you creating your store of positive karma, and that store of positive karma is having an impact on your mind, which is also not allowing the negative karma to ripen, but also is filling your mind with more happiness, I guess, because the strength of those delusions can't be, you're not giving them attention. And again, that's, you're not familiarising yourself with those states of mind. So it is this idea of that we have some control. We can impact our mind, the way we think, our intention, our actions towards others, our behaviours, all have this impact on ourselves and on others, and that we have that ability to shape that. And so, because the more, so the cause of suffering is the 12 links of interdependent origination, but it's the wrong view that causes the delusions to arise. And the delusions cause negative karma, and the negative karma causes more delusions. So it's this kind of idea of a cycle. And that's that idea of wanting to break, to sort of have some power, because that cycle does take over. Those mental states become quite ingrained and very strong, and before we know it, we're an angry person, or we're depressed, or these things, because our mind has become very familiar, very ingrained, and very enveloped in this kind of thinking, weighed down, So that's sort of kind of karma in a nutshell, I guess. Any questions about that while I'm there? Has freaked everybody out? So we will do some meditation tonight. And we're going to do the Buddha meditation tonight. So I thought this meditation is really about generating love and compassion. And it is about generating the mind of love and compassion through the deity, using the Buddha image. And I'm not sure if people are familiar with those sorts of meditations before. But again, these sorts of meditation are, again, having an impact on the mind in the positive. So again, you're using your mind and using visualization. So from, again, with conduct and view, with the idea of view in Buddhism, it's the teachings that are teaching you about analytical meditation, or working with your mind and developing wisdom. And the wisdom is the mind that is a mind of increasing your intelligence, increasing your wisdom, and then you're able to get insight into how your mind is, how anger might be playing out in your mind, or how you are at the control of more negative delusions, or how, if you do develop good positive states, how that helps you. So you need a mind of wisdom, of analytical strength, to do those meditations. And again, that's about cultivating your own mental states, own positive mental states. Then conduct, right conduct is right action, not harming, developing love and compassion. And they're called the method practices. So they're practices, again, to help you expand your mind and to clear your mind and to make your mind more full of positive energy and love. And then that sort of, again, the intelligence and the love and compassion work together. So from in Buddhism they say it's like two wings of a bird. So you need both. You need to cultivate this sort of warm-heartedness and softness and openness, and at the same time develop the sharpness and intensity and intelligence. And those two things work together to really work your own mind. They're the tools of working your mind. And also the tools of bringing you about happiness to yourself, but also then happiness to the people around you. And that's the good karma, and that then you're caught in a positive kind of cycle. you're building on that. So again, it's just like little drops of water. Like the analogy is, if you put a bucket of water under a dripping tap, you're really surprised at how quickly it fills up. So it's, again, spiritual practice is like that. It's just the drops of water. It's just, your happiness level goes slowly but surely in a direction. So if he's got propensities to be angry a lot, by working with your mind to really understand your anger and to catch your anger and to pull back on your anger, because you realise that your anger isn't a positive mental state and isn't helpful to you, then it's that little bit by little bit, because remember, if you are an angry person or whatever, jealous person or over-desirous person or whatever your issue might be, those pathways are worn. The reason why you might be so angry is because it's quite ingrained, you're quite familiar, it's quite habituated, there's like that karmic potential is quite potent. So you again, with your mind, it's about training and about cultivating your own mind for other states. And that first might be just recognising it and then stepping back. Or same with if it's anxiety as well. If it's worry, then too much worry, it's about trying to step back and create a space. And so that's so you use your wisdom to see, and then you use your love and compassion to sort of soften and give yourself a bit of space and a bit of love as well. So that's how we have to work with our minds. And again, it's up to us. Nobody can work with our minds. That's completely up to us. And I always like it, Geshe used to always say, if people could see what's happening in your mind, then you'd probably be pretty embarrassed. Lots goes on in our minds. So, nobody has insight into our minds. Nobody, the Buddha does probably. But nobody else can see what's going on in our mind. But we can, if we care to look, we can. And we might feel, it's too horrible, I can't see it. It's too embarrassing, it's too shameful or too icky. But it's actually by looking, and just by looking, nothing bad can really happen. It feels like the boogeyman's there, but he's actually not there. Again, nobody can see our minds, and only we can see our minds. Only we can look at our minds. And, it's just, again, a bit by bit. It's a bit by bit, you look at your mind. You don't, pull back the cover but it's just it's been a bit courageous to have a look inside your mind. And I think that's with anxiety, we actually spend a lot of time, worry comes up in our minds, so we externalise that worry and then we interact with that worry. We totally externalise it, and then when we've externalised it, we engage it. And then we've made it real. Then we have made it real, because it's something out there and it's something I can't control, and it's something that's happening to me, and I'm a victim of it now, and now it's just out of control because I have actually externalised it. But it's actually, if we can see that anxiety, whatever our external anxiety is actually coming from our inside us, and then if we look at that itself, not look at what the fear it is, because our anxiety might be, fear of losing our job, losing our partner, or death, or whatever, all of those many things we're anxious about. When COVID, many people got anxious. But if we can just sit with the anxiety itself, before we've externalised it to an object, to a thing, a person, if we can sit, because anxiety, the object, the thing and the person isn't anxious or fearful. It's how you project onto it. So that's what we have to learn to sit with. And little bit by little bit, always remember the drop in the bucket. To me that was very profound. The drop in the bucket will eventually be a full bucket. So even sit with a little bit of anxiety, aren't projecting it to a thing, because a thing, even what you're projecting it, is mental. So don't sit with the idea of the picture you've built, but sit with the anxiety itself, even if it's just for 30 seconds. And then you'll see, if you really just sit with that and try and pinpoint it, it probably will disappear. But if you're thinking of the story around your anxiety, then you're going around and round and round, and you are creating a delusion around that anxiety. So they're quite different. Often we meditate on our delusions. I'm so angry with that person did that, I am so angry, and they did that, and then they said that, and then they went over there, and I can't believe they did. That is how we treat our minds. That's how we treat our minds. We are building our anger, building negative. So if I sit there for an hour ruminating over what somebody said to me, they said that, and when they meant that, and I couldn't believe they did that, and when I see that person, I'm likely going to be rude to that person or have these ideas about this person that they have about me. So already my mind is built up. And then I act, then I speak, then I act. I judge, I'm rude, I might even say something hurtful. But I was the one who created that. Or I was the one who chose to take it on and create that. So that's what I mean. So the idea is, instead if I sat there and meditated on love towards that person, spent my half an hour, I just wasted my life thinking bitchy thoughts. If I thought about love, then I'd see that person, I'd think, oh, hi. That's what I mean. It's up to us. The choice is ours. And it's hard at first because we're so habituated to thinking in a certain way, and we feel rewarded for thinking in a certain way. We feel vindicated, and we feel victim, and we feel a whole lot of things. Justified. And we feel, I have to get back at them, or I have to, lots of energy. That's why, again, ethical conduct would tell us, well, let's take, harsh speech and gossip and all of these things are actually harmful to me and to others. Developing love and compassion is going to be beneficial for me and for others. Also, the more I go on about feel anxious or angry or jealous, it is actually taking a lot of energy, and it's actually, from a Buddhist perspective, suffering. Suffering is mental, and that they are the delusions, and that's us creating them. So, so that's about this idea of taking a bit of control and using these practices to help you do that. So, we'll do the Shakyamuni Buddha meditation. So I'll just explain a little bit how that works. So that is a visualization meditation. And we're going to use the Buddha as the image. So the Buddha's behind me. Now you know a little bit of his backstory. And these meditations, so visualization. So again, everything we do starts off with a thought or a visualization in our mind, whether it's worrying about work, worrying about money, worrying about our partner, worrying about what happened to us, worrying about the future, worrying about our finances, worrying about our investments, worrying about when we retire, worrying about our children, worrying about our health, worrying about that we're not good enough or we're not feeling great. All of these things are mental activity. And so the idea of a meditation like this is to give ourselves a bit of a break from that kind of mental activity, and also to by visualizing, we're kind of imprinting our mind with the Buddha is used. He's a universal, he became enlightened because he had generated real ultimate love for all sentient beings. So you don't have to be a Buddhist to use the Buddha image, because he generated, his love is for all. He doesn't care who's a Buddhist or not. So that's why anybody can use and get some real result out of using his image. And he turned his mind into this omniscient state of love and awareness that was totally imbued together. Awareness of all things and blissful love. So, when we imagine that in our mind, that's the connection we're making. That is the kind of state we're putting our mind in. So that in itself is generating a positive mind, because you're connecting with a positive thing. And we're not doing it through analytical meditation, is a lot of heavy conceptions and words and thinking, but you're doing it more with visualization. So it's a little space, and his body, when you imagine it, it's filled with light. So that's really getting to a subtler level of our mind. So we're dealing less conceptual. It's still conceptual, obviously, but it's less than language and heavy conceptual ideas. So visualization is a really powerful technique, because you've got that beautiful image, it's light filled, and you're using that light, and that really represents more subtle states of mind. So you're really connecting deeper with more subtle states of mind, and then the idea of love, which is our mind. When our mind is totally peaceful and tranquil, it is in this very loving, open space. And that's our more natural, that's a more deeper level states of our mind. So we're connecting right in with them. So, that is why, and that's they in themselves are those positive, relaxed, open states. So that's sort of why we use visualization, and why it's quite powerful, and why it's a nice way to meditate. So I'll guide us through, there is a mantra that you can do with this. So if you wanted to do this at home, I'm always happy to email people if they wanted to have it at home. And if you want the mantra, I'm happy if you want to come to me afterwards. I can say the mantra a little bit, and then if you want to do it as well. So mantra, again, a mantra is a deeper it's a deeper truth. So again, it's these sort of beyond sort of symbolic sounds. So it's the idea of sound, of resonating energy, and again, these sort of positive, illicit positive states within our mind. So if you've had a hard day and it's really busy and you feel your body's tensing up, the idea of having light and mantra is relaxing and calming for our body and mind. All right, so everybody, when we meditate, we can sit on a chair, on the floor, doesn't matter. The main thing is to have a straight back, and your shoulders sort of sitting comfortably. Sort of check your posture. It's really, especially your spine should be straight. Shoulders relaxed. You can put your hands on your knees or together on your lap. Again, make sure your arms are got a bit of air between your elbows and that, yep. And sit them on your lap. And then relax your jaw. So relax your jaw. Take a few deep breaths to sort of settle your mind. And when you're breathing out, just think all of those concerns and troubles from the day, try and just breathe them out. Say, for this next 10, 15 minutes, I'm dedicating to my happiness and to generating love, and forget them for now. They'll be there waiting for you, don't worry. So, and now have your eyes slightly open and your gaze down, and just relax your breath, relax into your breath. And as we spoke about karma, intention is always important. So you can set the intention of this meditation that you wish to help all beings, including yourself, to be free of suffering and to have the causes of happiness. So that's the very reason why you're doing this. Now visualize above the crown of your head Buddha Shakyamuni, and he's seated on a throne, a lotus throne, and it has a sun and a moon cushion. And these symbolize the three principal aspects of the path, which is enlightenment, renunciation, and bodhicitta, and wisdom and emptiness. So Buddha is golden in colour, his body is filled with light, and it radiates out in all directions. His hair is black and has a top knot. He has a beautiful face. His eyes are half open and gazing, but also gazing out. He is seated in the full cross-legged position, and he's wearing a saffron robe of a monk, and he has a begging bowl in his left hand, and he's touching the ground. His right hand is resting on his knee, but touching the ground. So Guru Buddha is extremely beautiful, and he smiles serenely, and his compassionate gaze is out towards you and all other living beings. So try and really feel his presence. And remember that he has perfect qualities, and he has no defilements. His mind is completely omniscient and full of love, and that he got enlightened in order to benefit you. So now in your mind, request the Buddha to help you to become free from all your negative energy, ignorance and problems. And request him to bless you and for you to gain all the realizations on the path to enlightenment. And then really feel that he accepts this request. He's present and he's there. He's omniscient, so that's possible. And he really accepts this request that he will help you and all other beings. So now visualize rays of light streaming down from Guru Buddha, and they come from his heart, and they go right through, and they enter your crown, and they enter through your crown, and they completely fill your body. So your whole body becomes clear and completely filled of this light, which is love. And while the Buddha's doing it to you, he's equally doing it to all other sentient beings as well. So from the power of your request, he's also doing it for all others. So you can feel that you're helping yourself and all beings. So just hold this meditation, and you can imagine at Buddha's heart there is the mantra Om Muni Muni Maha Muniye Soha. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni E Soha. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni E Soha. And this mantra goes out of Buddha's, around Buddha's heart, and just as the light rays blaze out of him in all directions and blaze down into through your crown chakra, down through your body, so the mantra also does. And the mantra sits at your heart, so it goes into your heart and it sits there. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni E Soha. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni E Soha. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni E Soha. So you can also imagine that all negative states of mind are leaving you like black smoke through the bottom of your body as your body fills up with light. And now Buddha Shakyamuni dissolves into light above you, from where you've got it above the crown of your head. And now that light enters now your crown of your head and sits in your heart, dissolves into your heart. And now your body, speech and mind become inseparable with the holy body, speech and mind of Guru Buddha. So may the merits accumulated through engaging in this meditation become a cause to quickly attain the ultimate state of Buddha for the benefit of all beings. you can come out of the meditation now. Felt very nice. See how much nicer? So like again, you don't have to be Buddhist or even identify as Buddhist or want to be spiritual, but that meditation is a universal love and compassion meditation, and so it's a good one to do, I think. Very quite simple, but really powerful. And again, especially if you're an overthinker, those visualizations, just very simple visualization, and we've all seen that now the image of the Buddha around, it's a very popular image, so we're familiar with it, so that imprint of it being in our mind, and it does give us a connection to Buddha, who has all those good qualities. Okay, so any questions or people anyone has? Yes, yeah. So yeah, he's meant to be above the crown of your head. Sitting there, yeah. I know people, sitting up there. So all Buddhist so the idea of he's higher than you, so he's up there, and his blessings are coming down. So the idea is that his blessings will come down on you and radiate out to all beings. Yeah. So I know that the lamas often joke about it, that people struggle, and if it's down on my head and it's too hard, and so it's about there on your head, I think, up there. And sometimes some people might have it facing towards them or facing out. Usually I think it's facing out, but again, that's where you're comfortable with. Play around, but above the crown. So, and then the light comes down straight into your crown chakra there. So through there. Yep. 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 Yeah, sure. So the question, just so people can't hear, is that did the Buddha have any advice or teachings on dealing with angry or people who make you trigger your anger? Should you avoid them? Yep. So there is this thing. One thing is to pick your friends wisely, because if you're in a group of friends and they're a little bit negative, you're easily going down that path. So absolutely, or friends, if you're a group of friends who make you angry or bring out the worst in you, your first point of call is to remove yourself. Yep, that's definitely. So that, don't associate with people who are going to. And then you get to the point where it doesn't matter who you associate with, because you have got such control of your mind, and that you're not at all influenced by others, and that you would be giving love out and not be triggering or not projecting onto that. So you get to that point. But definitely the first bit of advice is to don't associate with people who aren't helpful to you. And because we are social animals and there's that social contagion, I'm personally not on social media, but that's a really negative space, I think, and lots of, so definitely. Yes?
Just talking about the thing about anger, I think about like antidote of patience. You feel your anger arising, patience.
Yep. Yep, so that's the teaching there. So patience is not responding. So one of Shantideva describes it as be like a piece of wood. So if you were with a person who was So it depends how you can control your triggers. If you're triggered, then the best to stay away. But if you can get a bit of control over your mind, so there's a bit of space, somebody says or does something you can see your anger. That's what I was saying. When you've got a bit of wisdom, you can reflect in and you can see it. Then you can make a choice. There's my angry mind. It's not, I'm not angry person. It's, there's my angry mind. There's the person. There's my angry mind. I've got a choice. That's the insight. That's the wisdom. And then the best response is to remain like a piece of wood. Patience is non-responding. Because you know yourself. It doesn't matter what you say to people. They're going to think and do what they're going to think and do at the end of the day. So you use your wisdom. I know it doesn't matter what I say or do. I'm only harming myself and harming them if I get angry. And will I influence what they say or do? Probably not. So that's the wisdom. We talked about that insight and that wisdom, growing that intelligent mind to have the space and then say, yeah, whatever you say, that's fine. So, and that's the practice of patience, just being able to, your mind just is not perturbed. And you can, and that's the practice. Yeah, and you can watch yourself, how you can progress to that point, Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, so the question there was about with say in a workplace when you're managing people and they may not be doing the right thing and then you're feeling you have to manage them and you might have to have, confrontation or things. So anger is the mind of aversion. I don't like, I don't want. You're the problem, I'm pushing you away. Aversion, I've got a problem. So that is the mind of patience, is when you feel that, I want to push this person away. So anger is about, it's violent, it's about pushing, harming. That's anger. The problem of a work situation or a confrontation can be managed without it. So we still have to, if you're a manager, people have to be accountable, people have to be clearly explained what the expectation is, and if they don't meet that expectation, maybe from a work point of view, is that you manage them out. Or that's fine, that's not anger. As long as you don't do it with anger, they may get angry, they certainly will, but you can't take on their anger as long as you're doing it that, it's clear and it's fair and it's transparent and it's accountable and that's your expectation. Again, you can't judge. For them to be angry is probably, if you thought about it, quite natural. It's actually to be expected. You don't have to become angry with that. You can think, well, I can see where their anger is. I feel for them. I feel that I have compassion for them. I'm sorry it's got to this point, but I felt I was clear, I felt I was transparent, I felt I was fair. They have a choice. So again, that's where people get confused. In Buddhism, because you can't get angry because anger's bad, you can't, you can enter confrontation or difficult things without getting angry. And people who can do that are the most powerful, who can stay very calm and very fair and very open and can see that person is making bad choices. But that's not for you to take. You can't, again, like we said, my mind is my mind. I can only work with my mind. I can feel love and compassion for somebody, but as long as you're not doing it, if you got angry with them and started fighting them and it became quite toxic, that's going to fall out and be negative for everybody. That's what you have to identify, and that's the skillful means, the right skillful means. So that's why if you do it ethically and fairly, but there's nothing wrong with saying, hello, we're here to work, this is the expectation, I expect you to do it. And I'm gonna make sure you do, because that's my job. But I'm just gonna do it in a nice way. So, yeah. Yep.
Also, you may not know the cause of their anger.
No, that's right.
It makes it very difficult, because it could be something sinister, it could be something minor, and to work around that, I find that so difficult.
Yeah, and we don't have to work around it. All we have to do is think of, well, what am I doing here? And be very clear. And again, in our meditation we can generate compassion and love, and then we can do it with kind heart. Then we can do it. But, like you said, we don't know. People have a lot of trauma and anxiety, and all we have to feel for that, connect and understand the trauma and anxiety, that they have it. But, as long as we're kind to them and we're clear, that's how we have to move in a skillful way. But nobody said we can't take on that, because we don't even know what that is. And I think people they think they have to take it on. I'm a good person, I want to be a good person. And that, but that's being very unkind to yourself too, in a way, because you're burdening yourself with a lot of stuff that you can't control, So Buddhism is really working with your mind, and when your mind is strong and good, you're in a much better position to help people, because you're not reacting, you're not projecting, you're not entering into the fray, you're not confusing your desire and needs with their desire and needs. You're very clear. And then you can operate from a very clear point of view that's fair and loving and centered. People might not like it, but nobody's ever going to like you. It's not, you know what I mean? You have to accept that everyone's not going to like you, but it's the heart, it's your intention for them, and they might have intention to harm you, so you're better off probably not being around them. You know what I mean? You have to make that judgment, and that's where the wisdom, and that's where I think Buddhism is very clear about those sorts of things. Yeah. Yes, so the question is there an appropriate time to be angry? No, because anger, from the idea of anger, from a Buddhist point of view, is to harm. It's a motivation of harming. It's an aversion. I don't want, so I'm going to push away, or I'm going to harm that thing. I don't want it. So when you're shouting or pointing out or that's what that's about. So when we talked about karma, it's the intent to harm, the intent to hurt. So in that way, if it's pure anger, there's not it can be useful, like it can have an effect. An immediate effect might be that person goes, oh shoot, she's serious, I'll do what I have to do. But resentment is often then result. You'll see the people will say, oh well, so it might seem to have a good intended consequences, but it probably hasn't, because they've just got resentment now, and now they're going to probably target you, and it's going to get worse. But in all the Buddhist deities and that, they depict these ones with fangs and heads and so the idea of wrath. So that, like a mother, they describe it. If a mother has a 2-year-old and the toddler starts to run out on the road, that mother might scream at that child, stop, 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 you're meant to come here. In her heart and in her mind, she doesn't have anger. She hasn't lost her love and the need to protect that child. But to manage the situation, she might raise her voice. She might have to really be quite strong and wrathful. So again, it's your intent. So you could appear to be wrathful or scary. It's what the intent is. If it is to protect and to help, and that's really, you're not pretending, but you're really like a mother and a toddler. You can imagine her going, "Now stop, little one," at that point when the child's about to hit the road. The best thing she would do would be to probably scream out, "Stop, stop," you know, or to the car. So, but because her intent hasn't changed. So that's why your intention is really important. So somebody might judge you as being horrible and mean, but if you know in your heart your intent is good, it doesn't matter what people think, because it's really what's in your mind. And again, people won't know that, but you don't have to be worried about what they think. You just have to be worried, you just have to remember what your intent is. But yeah. All right, so we'll give that a wrap. So there's cake and tea in the dining room for people who would like to have that. And if you wanted the mantra or the meditation, and we'll probably do it again next week anyway, because it's a nice one. Happy to share. Okay, thank you.